Good morning. Thank you all for being here. My name is Tammy Stotts, and I work with the Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship, and I am honored to be here today to talk about our programs and to be up here with these other panelists, Giselle and Linda. They will introduce themselves in a minute, but just to give you a little bit of history of where we are each coming from, I guess. I've been with the Iowa Department of Agriculture for nearly 30 years, and in that time I have worked with the soil and water conservation, as well as farmers markets and the nutrition program, and most recently my work is the Farm to School and the Specialty Crop Block Grant. This work has led to a lot of work in the regional food system, where I've been blessed to connect with all of these ladies and these programs that we're going to talk about. So the Local Food Purchase Assistance Program, the Local Food for Schools, also LFS, LFPA, and soon the Resilient Food System Infrastructure Program. And the one thing I want to say, we maybe need to back up, yeah. Before we really get started, the one thing Iowa has that I think makes us unique and really stand out is that our ability to collaborate. When you have amazing, passionate partners coming together to do this work, anything is possible. And the Local Food Purchase Assistance Program has proven that. We have come together to create a program that will outlive the funding. This is sustainable work that we're doing, and we are learning and adapting as we go. There's no rule book for this, and we are creating the best program we can to serve Iowans in the best capacity possible. And this program, LFPA, it does, the work that is being done with this also serves the Local Food for Schools programs. We're creating a registered vendor system, pricing lists, and we're working with socially disadvantaged farmers, Iowa beginning farmers, and getting that food to underserved communities. The three overarching goals for this program, as listed, are to strengthen the regional and local food system, to help socially disadvantaged farmers get into the system, and also then to develop and strengthen those partnerships that we've created through all of this work and get this food to underserved communities throughout the state. Everything that we're doing with this program has been very intentional, and we are trying to make the most, have the highest integrity. Many of the things that we're doing aren't required by USDA, but we have put these systems in place. So we've created 4 steering committees, and I should mention that Iowa Valley RC&D has been contracted as the contracting partnering agency for this work. And through that, we've got steering committees, we have distribution committee, producer committee, and a financial committee. And on these, we've been very clearly tried to develop a system that has the partners that need to be. We want to make sure these voices that need to be heard are at the table. And so these different people are on the 4 different committees to just make sure that they're leading us in the right direction and we have oversight. And this map right here shows that work. This program covers the state. Iowa Department of Agriculture contracts with 15 distributors, and these distributors, as well as Meskwaki Nation, are how this food is getting where it's going. This map shows the colored sections. Those are the food banks, and then the other symbols, those are where the food hubs are throughout the state. And so all this food is getting to all of those counties. I think we have 86 counties, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But this is how it's getting done, and it's serving us well. So I will next, what's next? So we just recently applied for the RFSI program. That is an additional $5.2 million, and that has not been approved through USDA yet, but that will serve the middle supply chain, and that program will include equipment grants and some different opportunities throughout the state to get this food distributed where we need it and to help farmers and distributors in the wholesale system reach the goals of serving more Iowans more food.
Thank you, Tammy. We would not be here without Tammy and the support of the Department of Ag. So at its very basic, well, I will introduce myself, as Tammy said. My name is Giselle Bruskowitz. I'm the program director at Iowa Valley Resource Conservation and Development. We're a nonprofit that focuses a lot on food systems work across the state. We're based in Amana, and we have the privilege of being the organization that is managing this project with other partners, including, very importantly, the Iowa Department of Ag and Land Stewardship, who was granted this through the USDA. So at its very basic level, it is just about buying food at a fair price from local producers. That food goes through distributors. The distributors, as we're on the map, are food hubs, food banks, and Meskwaki Nation. And then it goes out to community members, Iowans, people who are experiencing food insecurity, who get all this product for free. So producers are getting a fair price, distributors are building the infrastructure for local food across the state, and more people are getting access to high quality food. This is the basics. If you take nothing away, it's just these three things. We'll get into a lot of the nuances of the processes and the committees and how it actually works and the stories from on the ground to show how it's working. But these first couple minutes, we just want to keep it high level of just where we are and how the program works at a high level. So if you visit our website, ilfpa.org, you'll see a by the numbers page. And so we're updating data from the first year of purchases through this program. And as you can see, it's about 50% produce and 50% protein that have been sold. And it's a really wide diversity of products. So it's not just meat and dairy, although it is a lot of meat and dairy. It's not just produce. There's also some grains and eggs and a lot of other products that if you dig into it, you can see the real diversity of what our state can produce. But the definition of local here is Iowa and bordering counties. So it's pretty much all small and mid-scale farmers and producers who are located, growing and producing in Iowa or the immediate bordering counties of Iowa. And if you want to learn more, again, highly encourage visiting that website, iowalfpa.org. A little bit more of the initial impact data, and this is just from the first year. So we learned about this program in June and got the funding, well into the growing season. So the food hubs typically are planning with producers and food banks are planning with producers at the beginning of the year, starting in December. Well, we're already in September when these sales started. So no one was buying seed or planting or booking locker dates in preparation for this. This is just what happened when we were building it while it was flying, and it's pretty impressive. So we have surpassed the $1 million mark in sales. We've distributed to 610 sites across the state of Iowa. That's serving 86 of 99 counties. I'm sure by the end of the program in 2025, we're going to say 99 counties. And that was from 194 producers. 121 of these producers are what we call tier 1 producers. So Tammy mentioned that the USDA gave us the charge to invest in socially disadvantaged producers. So the socially disadvantaged producers are described here. So we're talking about immigrant and refugee, LGBTQIA, BIPOC growers, veterans, women, and then those are tier 1. They self-identified in that way, and these are producers who often haven't had as much market access for a lot of reasons. And then beginning farmers as well. It's really hard to start a farm. It's really hard to sustain a farm. And farmers have been centered since the beginning of this program. We had farmer focus groups. We'll tell some stories about how some farmers were involved, but we really wanted to get that impact when we were creating the program to make sure that it's really benefiting the businesses and the long-term viability of those producers. And we have room to grow. This was the initial survey. Not everyone agreed, so we want to get that pie chart up to all green. I'm wearing several hats. So Iowa Valley does have the privilege of managing this program, but we also facilitate the Food Hub Managers Working Group, who have played a key role in this project. And for those of you who aren't familiar, food hubs they manage the aggregation, storage, and distribution of source-identified products. So they have close relationships with their producers, they plan with them, and they're working sort of as that sales and marketing and distribution arm, similar to what food banks do to sort of get food out to the community from producers. And so we've been building this hub-to-hub network across the state. So it's building that physical infrastructure to make sure that we're safely storing and transporting all of the food, but also the social infrastructure, because this is all of this is about relationships. Do you have a trusting relationship with the producers? Do you have a trusting relationship with the pantries? We're building trusting relationships between food hubs and food banks. The relationships are also what make this work. And the LFPA has allowed us to do that on a completely different scale. So we're learning a lot and growing a lot. What's next? We got to keep, as Tammy says, we got to keep putting the puzzle pieces together. We all have a part to play, and we need to work and collaborate so that we can figure out how to keep on sustaining this program. And we should think collaboratively of how to recruit more funding to fund these kinds of projects. Linda.
Thanks. I'm Linda Gorko. I am with the Iowa Food Bank Association. The Iowa Food Bank Association is comprised of 6 Feeding America food banks across the state of Iowa. We serve 99 counties, and we work with 1,400 agency partners across the state, the largest charitable network that feeds Iowans in the state of Iowa and serving all 99 counties. I wanted at least, we talk about setting the table where we are. And as you heard this morning, the need is high. Food donations are down. Actually, it's higher, the need is higher than it was during the pandemic. At the height of the pandemic, all of the food banks across the state of Iowa distributed over 50 million meals. This past year, we distributed 43 million meals across the state of Iowa. The one thing that held us back is not enough food, and we live in Iowa. The inflation, unable to match the dollar that we had before inflation hit, it's difficult to purchase exactly all the things that we need. And, it's wonderful, this just-in-time delivery system that all of our wonderful partners and businesses and manufacturers are being wonderful about maybe not as many packaging, and so we'd get that donation of food that they aren't able to sell. I'm glad they're being efficient, but every now and then it's nice to have a little oops to help a food bank, but there's less of that. So there's a lot of things happening in the state of Iowa and across the nation of really putting the pressure on the charitable networks and the work that we do to feed Iowans. Some of the things that before we started in this program, we've been talking, and the food banks have taken a sincere interest in steps towards this local foods. Food banking in the in the history used to put a box of cereal on a shelf and it would be there for a couple months. But that's not how it is. It's dynamic, it's fresh food, it's produce, it's meat. All of our pantries are really doing a dynamic work across the state of Iowa. The food banks work together. It's 30, 40 years of this work and network across the state that's been, this quietly doing the job of wonderful heroes that run the agencies. And a lot of people may not see what's happening, but the work that has been done has helped us get to the point where we are. We are ready to, and we need to provide that fresh produce, the meats, the all of a variety of foods for the hungry in Iowa. In the past, we started this, I think, and I can talk about it a little bit more, but organizations like the Northeast Iowa Food Bank, they have been purchasing milk from Hanson's for years. And they have growers in their area that set aside areas, on their land to grow. So there's a variety of programs. I think Food Bank of Iowa had done potatoes, purchasing, working with local growers to do this type of purchasing, but really always, perplexed, how can you get the funding to be able to purchase at the market value? Because the last thing we want is farmers in the lines as we distribute food. So working together is how we are setting forth to help this entire system work to benefit Iowans on every level. So, because the last thing we do want is a farmer in our lines. The pandemic was a little peek into, we experienced what happens if our food system totally changes and we can't have access to food supply chain. So I'll talk about it a little bit later, but that was a real eye-opening for us also. We knew this was an important part of the work that we need to do and want to do, but funding is it's a very big block for us that we're trying to slowly together work through. And this grant gave us an opportunity to work towards overcoming some challenges that we've been having. I think that when your need is high and the resources are low, you really get creative. And I think that's if you talk to all of our food sourcing team members across the state of Iowa, I think they'd say that with resounding yes. But the time to build those new relationships, and where are the farmers? Where are the farmers that want to grow more? How can we help them grow more? How can we build a stronger Iowa? How can we get the variety of foods that we need? And, the more local, the more power we give to Iowa also. I mean, we want to build the infrastructure for it. And when you look at the biggest key to all this, I think, is the relationship building and that education on both sides. For all of us is how much does a food bank, how much do we anticipate to purchase? What will we need? So that coordination, especially that first year we didn't have, we could tell you estimates about how much we would need and we'll take what you have. But initially we were like, do we have enough that we'll be able to use up all the money the first year? And like, well, yeah, we will. But it's the growers that stepped up and we were able to find some wonderful resources, so.
Okay. Yeah, so that's our basic, just general overview. If you want more information, feel free to reach out and contact us. We have Casey Ginn, our program manager, in the front row here, so if you email that info, she will get back to you. But the rest of the time here, we're going to move on to just a slideshow. We're going to have rolling photos from the program, photos of distributors, photos of pantries, photos of producers, and we're just going to share some stories and then open it up for a Q&A. So we are the panel, and you get to be, in some ways, the moderators that ask us questions. So we're going to share some stories, and hopefully that helps bring to life how this program is actually working on the ground in our communities. So one of the first stories, because we're talking about food banks and food hubs and thinking about how these partnerships are strengthening, and oftentimes these are new partnerships. So one of the ways that we're talking and building those relationships and figuring out solutions to problems together is we meet quarterly. We call it a community of practice. So all the distributors in the program come together and we share stories from around the state. One of the stories that Jen Miller, who is a very strong woman who manages a food hub, who will be popping up in some of these photos lifting boxes into trucks, she shared a story from her food hub, which is Farm Table Delivery in Harlan, Iowa, which is that west part of the state. We have 2 food banks on the west part of the state, Food Bank of the Siouxland and then Food Bank of the Heartland, northwest and southwest parts of the state. And so they have a lot of need. They're serving a large portion of the state of people who are experiencing food insecurity. And so they ended up coming together and partnering and thinking about what is the right kind of products to serve the northwest and the southwest parts of the state. And the procurement, sourcing from hundreds of producers, is a lot of communication work. It's a lot of aggregation. It's a lot of extra time and energy building that relationship up. And so what made the most sense in that context was for these 2 food banks to just purchase through the food hub and be able to help these farmers that were already scaling for wholesale to serve through the food hub. That does, they're doing, before this program, well over $500,000 in sales a year. So they have producers who know how to grow a lot. And be able to build those partnerships and figure out all the distribution and all of the logistics. But we come together so we can start to kind of figure out those really complicated problems. You'll hear me say this a lot, but it is not a one-size-fits-all. So that's one example of how it's happening in the western part of the state. There's hundreds of examples of how it's happening. That's just one of them. So what they learned was that food hubs can supply a lot of quantity of food to fit the needs of the banks, and that, they figured out all the reporting and all of the things to fit into this program together, and it's been working well.
I'll go to the east coast of
East
Iowa.
Coast, we always say the coasts. We know we're landlocked.
Well, we have Mississippi. On the eastern side of this state, there has been a really good working relationship built with Iowa Food Hub out of northwest Iowa and the Riverbend in Davenport, Riverbend Food Bank. And the resounding feedback has been, wow. Riverbend Food Bank has a satellite location in Dubuque, Iowa. That's their service area. Every food bank has a service area by county. And as they were setting things up, the wonderful food sourcing person at Riverbend said, hey, if we could get X amount, they put the order in, we could use X amount of food on a weekly basis. They were able to strategize and work together and coordinate the logistics. If you can get it to Dubuque, we'll leave some there, and then we'll take the rest down to Davenport. So it was a really great opportunity for Iowa Food Hub in northeast Iowa to expand their work and have a more consistent distribution to the schools in the Dubuque area. So I think that gave 2 programs a boost while helping. It was a win-win. So we're able to get the food delivered to Dubuque, and then Riverbend Food Bank then picked it up from there and shared it down to the southern area of their area. When we were talking about this, prior to joining Iowa Food Bank Association, I was the director at the Haycap Food Reservoir. And I think when we were talking, the importance of local foods has always been on the forefront of all the food bank directors and food sourcing people across the state. The conundrum is always, how can we pay for it? We need the money. We need to figure out how to get enough money. But Jason, I don't know if he's the president.
Jason Grimm is our executive director at Iowa Valley.
It was 6 or 7 years ago. We did a cross-docking for a whole area on the east side of the state. And we were like, we got to get this figured out. But there was hope on both sides. And I think that's just like, to me, it was like the raindrop for me to say, we just have to work together to get the logistics and we have some wonderfully moving parts. It's just we need to coordinate it together. So we just need the money to buy local, more local. So.
Yeah, and I just want to throw in that I think when we talk about partnerships and we talk about collaboration, I had a lot to learn I have learned so much just by being involved. Do you know the day in, day out work of these groups, of food hubs, of food banks? And I'm not going to profess to know it now, but just that appreciation and respect for what's happening. And again, our desire to work together. And these programs are, as we said, putting pieces together. So we have the LFS. We have COVID, as bad as COVID has given us a lot of opportunities. We've had local produce and protein, and we've had some of these different platforms where we can start putting these pieces together and building these relationships between the hubs and the banks and additional farmers. And this increased knowledge and awareness we all have, while we hope funding can continue. We hope the Farm Bill will include additional funding. We hope on a state level to have additional funding. But these pieces that we're putting together will continue beyond those. And having those quarterly meetings and being able to listen to these people, it's goosebump material. I mean, it really touches your heart when you look at what's being done and the farmers being helped. I mean, it really is making an impact, I think, but to all Iowans, really, on some level. So. Yeah,
and it's like the 1 + 1 = 3 kind of situations where, as Linda's talking about, well, okay, maybe a food hub starts to deliver a lot of local product up to a food bank, and that food bank knows how to distribute, already has the routes out to their community, but maybe there's also a school there that it didn't make sense just to take the trip for that school, but now that we have the school and the pantries and food bank network, it starts to connect the dots. So we're seeing these kinds of 1 + 1 = 3 happen across this program. But yeah, as Tammy said, we get to sit up here and it's a privilege, but there are thousands of people working on the ground right now making this program happen. And we don't know all of those stories. If you visit our table upstairs or if you go online, there's a form where you can submit your stories. So I want to put a plug in for that as we're sharing stories, because we want to keep on learning about what is the impact? How has this actually affected people's lives, people who have received the food, the pantries who are able to get this high quality product, the producers who are seeing a change in their business. We were talking a lot about the distributors, but there's thousands of people, hundreds of organizations, hundreds of farms that are part of this program. So I'm going to share one story from the many, which is just a tip of the iceberg, but I'm going to talk about Schaefer Ridgway, who is famous on these slides, by the way. He's in here a lot, and I'll share why. In part, Schaefer Ridgway owns a farm in Waterloo, Iowa, called Southern Goods. He came from the South, he moved into Iowa and wanted to grow foods that were culturally relevant to the South and to his identity as a black farmer. And there's a lot of folks around Waterloo that want access to collards and okra and purple whole peas, and there he is on his tractor. And he's an incredible advocate, an incredible storyteller. He's part of We Arose Food Co-op, so he's organizing with other producers. They're working on feeding their community, this is their bread and butter. He caught wind. He also works for the USDA as NRCS for the last 25 years. So he caught wind of this program early, and he's calling all of us up, asking, what's the plan? How are you gonna do this? Started offering his feedback about what would be helpful from a producer perspective, and was really holding our feet to the fire about how we were gonna do this and if it was really gonna help farmers. And he agreed to join our PPC, the purchasing committee, to make sure we have farmer representation in shaping this, and he served on the committee, and sales start going September, October, November, December. We're meeting every other week. I'm like, Schaefer, you haven't registered for the program yet. And he's like, well, we're gonna see, I know, I'm gonna get on that. But a key element here is, and Rich Pirog, who's a local food leader in the state of Iowa, used to run the Leopold Center, he always said relationships are built at the speed of trust. And it was not until we launched phase 2 of this program, which sales started earlier this year in 2023 in April, when the committees distributed funding based on the work plans that the food hubs, food banks, and Meskwaki Nation submitted, based on a criteria of how it benefits socially disadvantaged producers. And that's how the money was distributed. He's like, when I saw that, I knew that you were actually putting your money where your mouth is, and I decided to register. From there, he just took it and ran. He called up multiple distributors, found what was the right fit, started talking contracts, forward purchasing. He raises cattle, tons of produce, and he built those relationships to make it work on both ends. And so he talks about, I mean, he's an expert storyteller. He would do a much better job being up here than me. But he talks about his relationship with Becca at the Northeast Iowa Food Bank. And he's like, I sat down, I really liked Becca. He's like, I trusted her. We talked straightly to each other about how this contract could work. We shook hands, and he did that with some other food hubs and food banks, and he scaled up for this year, and he is selling a lot into the program. And he said, this has changed my business and my life forever. Like, this is giving me what my business needs to get to that next level where we can stick around. And that's one story. And 191 producers have sold already into this program, and I can imagine, and I hope, that a lot of those producers have a similar story. I probably took your parts. If you have anything to add.
It's all the same. We're all together. I think Secretary Nag had mentioned about the COVID, and I had mentioned it a little bit, but we really felt the pain of during COVID and the pandemic, and we had the ability to pivot because we utilized local resources with the Iowa pork producers and got meat procured, and at ISU Meat Lab, beef also. So ground beef, ground pork, we got turkey, all the things that we talked about that we needed, some of the basics. We also did purchasing, large purchasing. We had a couple grain producers that decided to donate product to us up in northeast Iowa, and then we purchased additional product from them. But we actually packaged it and through the food banks and got it out across the state. And that opened our eyes also, the ability that we can pivot, that the local foods can. We need to strengthen that muscle. It's a little painful now, as we work through things, but I think it really realizing we've gotten through what we've done, we didn't know what we could do, so I can't imagine what we will do. I think the system is just at the beginning stages of where we could go, but it is an area of, it comes back to the community, and it's not only feeding Iowans, but it's feeding Iowa and our, when we look at our the growth of rural areas and communities across the state, it's putting the funds back. During the pandemic, really quick, we had the opportunity to purchase almonds from California, and you're like, no, we're not going to purchase almonds from California, but really looked at what could we do locally and what are those opportunities to purchase from the Turkey Federation. We pivoted and made sure that it stayed within the state as much as possible. So.
Okay, now we're running out of time. We need a day for this, but just to talk about some of the things that felt so good. There was I can't remember the name of the farm, but a farm that actually, to get this done, like you said, there is not one size fits all. So it's the banks, it's the hubs. We should have a panel of I don't know how many people up here making this happen day in, day out. But there's opportunities for farmers in some points, at some places too, to actually make deliveries. And so a farmer, you'll probably be able to tell me the name of the farm, but was delivering to a local pantry. And for them to have that opportunity to take the food that they grew and then leave that food with that pantry, it just really touches hearts. It inspires us all. And again, this is just a small piece. We're looking at $6.4 million over between LFPA and LFS. And that is significant when you're talking about food, local food in Iowa. This is significant. And in the beginning, can we get this done? With local produce and protein, we had $500,000. We didn't get to release it until September. It was COVID. It was during COVID. And so again, the food is already in the ground. There's no time to plan for this. If we actually had time to plan, as we do now with LFPA for the next couple of years. But that makes all the difference. We spent $600,000 with local produce and protein with some school equipment grants to work with local foods. We gave them money to buy the local foods. If they wanted any equipment, which was $2,000 or less, I believe, they had to have buy local food. And then we gave some farmer small equipment grant, again, under $5,000. But just setting people up, we spent $600,000 from the end of September through the beginning of December. It was done. That's harvest. I mean, we're talking about a short window. So the impact is great, and the ability to make additional, to really change things with intentional planning there is no limit. I really feel like we can do a lot.
So we have about 10 minutes left, and we have so many more stories on our notes that we could tell, but I want to leave time for questions and answers. So if you don't have questions, we can keep talking, but all day long. But yeah, does anyone in the audience have any questions that you'd like to ask? Yeah, in the back there. I'm going to repeat the question for the folks online. So the question was asking more about just-in-time deliveries, asking about sort of like donations from local producers and what percentage of that gap could be filled by local.
That is a great question. And for me to give you say that I have the answer, I don't. I'd be lying, and I don't want to do that for you. But it has impacted those donations that we would otherwise get. What percentage of it could be 20%, 25%? Every community is different, and it changes over time. I remember when I was, I hate to say this, but there was an accident in a semi. And then that means we got a donation because that semi was denied to go. So, I don't mean to celebrate something that negative happens, but it does affect it. And LFPA right now, in regards to the impact of the food banks, TFAP is down quite a bit. So we all know that the impact of the additional food that we would usually get from TFAP compared to what we had during COVID, especially, is down quite a bit. And the LFPA funds right now, it's a tiny bit of what we need right now, but it's growing. It has the capability, if we have the funding, to grow. And every community is different, so the percentages might be different in everybody. So I'd hate to give you a blanket statement of how much, but if that helps at all. So, but.
And I wanted to say quickly, because Giselle has more she can add, I'm sure. But so one of the things that we were going to talk about, but we ran out of time, is the pricing. So we have a pricing guidance, and we have an amazing person that sets that. She works with farmers. She understands the system better than probably anyone else. And we have a low price and a high price range because we do want this to be sustainable. And it costs a different, a larger farmer can produce at a lesser expense than a socially disadvantaged small farmer just starting out. So having those pricing guidance also for local food for schools, we have food hub managers, so the schools they work with their food hub to get that food that they want. And again, that pricing guidance also tells us what is eligible and what isn't, because local food for schools has a pretty strict set of rules of what you can and can't buy. So those are other important pieces.
Yeah, one more thing I'll just add is that we keep hearing from the food hubs who are working with the producers who keep saying the problem is demand. We can supply as much as people need. We can scale up if we know there's a market. And then we hear from the other side of the problem is supply. We cannot get what we need for the food banks and for the pantries. So what Tammy's discussing is this pricing issue, which is there's a lot of farmers and people who are distributing for free the surplus that they have on farm. But what's different about this program is the ability for them to scale their business and scale their production to actually meet the needs that we have in the state in a sustainable way, rather than planting an extra acre and then, oh, if there's no market, then I guess I'll just give a half an acre away for free. This is about finding that price, that happy medium, negotiating, working on the just-in-time, working on the logistics to make it make sense for everybody.
And I think at Northeast Iowa Food Bank, they've been working very closely with the farmers and saying, we need the entire watermelon crop you can put in the ground. And then we have other food banks that's like, and if you have extra, we'll buy. So that statewide communication, but that contract of, yes, we need this product. I will say also, Northeast Iowa Food Bank had been probably the longest program is the Hanson Dairy. And when they, and I know Dan and Debbie's now, HACAP is doing it, when they're making ice cream, rather than dumping the skim milk, they're purchasing the skim milk through the program, and has made a tremendous impact. So we're reducing waste. We're putting product into the hungry people, and dairy farmers are getting at least something from what would otherwise be thrown away. So that, I mean, that's another opportunity. So
In the blue here, yeah. So the question, I'll repeat it for folks online, and this is the question everyone is asking. This is the elephant in the room. What happens when the funding goes away? Because it's a 3-year grant for the LFPA. It's done in 2025 as it stands right now. And we're having a lot of discussions around this. And Linda, I think you have thoughts on it. Do you mind if okay, we've got a couple minutes. I think there's several solutions and ways that we can continue to think about this and work together. I will say that there is advocacy happening. The lovely photos of Schaefer were taken as part of the Wallace Center is doing national level advocacy, has done robust studies, and has a report online of how to advocate for this program, and they're working to get it into the Farm Bill, and they're working into work with NDC to see if we can find space to keep funding it that way. I have 4 other ideas, but I want to let the other people talk too.
no, sure. Well, the other is the commitment to, the food banks. There is funding that we raise money. I mean, we're out raising money all the time, and as much as we can, we want to continue with that fair price as much as possible. And so I think there's been some really great relationships built, and where it's going to happen in the future, we just, we're as strong as our supporters and our donors, so we continue to believe that this is going to be something we're going to be able to continue. Some of the things that we have been doing across the state, we had it before this funding came about, so we'll just, but we hope that it's continued and expanded, so call your senators and representatives. This is the time, they're writing it and they're finishing things up, so.
Just lastly, and Giselle already mentioned this, but there will be impact and evaluation, and that work is, that's hard to do. We're so busy doing the work, sometimes it's hard to step back. And as far as USDA goes, they do use Iowa as a model, oftentimes, for a lot of the things that we're doing. Because again, not because we have the longest growing season, but because we have this collaboration. We work together. And we're all vested in this. So I think all of those things are going to help us in sustainability.
We have 38 seconds left. So with that time...
And Giselle has 3 more ideas on how we can keep it sustainable.
I'm not going to try to cram those all in. I will just say thank you for your time and for coming to this session. I would encourage you to, in your communities, let people know about this program. If you are an advocate, do the advocacy that Linda mentioned, call up representatives, tell them that this is a great program. And then also, we'll be around. We have tables upstairs. We're about to go to lunch. So hope to continue the conversation
Share your stories.
and share your stories.